Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining our webinar today. We have Vera from Location 3 with us, and the topic for the call is Preparing for a Privacy-Focused World in Marketing and Advertising. Today's webinar is available for CFE credits. If you are attending today's webinar for CFE credit, we want to welcome you this afternoon. If you're not currently an IFPG member, we'd also like to invite you for a free tour of our site and all the features that we offer. We routinely offer our members ongoing educational sessions just like this one today. You can send an email over to our membership director, Hira Mirza. Her email is hira, Hirra, @ifpg.org for more information. All lines will be muted for the call. Please enter all questions and comments into the questions box, and we will address them at the end of the presentation. And with that being said, Vera, it is all you.
Yeah, hi everyone. Welcome to the webinar. Thank you for attending. My name is Vera Shafiq. I am VP of Digital Strategy at Location 3, based out of Denver. And I'm really excited to present some ideas here on how we would prepare for a privacy-focused world in marketing and advertising. It's a hot topic. And it's something that marketers in general are really kind of a little scared about, but also kind of wanting to learn more. And so in this webinar, we'll look at why privacy has become such a hot topic for consumers as well as for businesses that use digital marketing to reach those consumers, which is pretty much every single business. So moving on to the next slide here, this is just a little bit here about the agenda and what we'll cover today in the next 30 minutes or so. But looking at this lady here on the screen, I mean, have you ever had an experience that made you wonder if your devices are actually listening into your private conversations? Or perhaps you've been targeted by an ad for something that you only ever spoke to someone about. It's a feeling that has become more and more common in today's society, and people have actually become really acutely aware of the power that brands have to monitor and record what they do on the web and then advertise that to them based on their findings. More than ever, consumers value their privacy, and many have a strong sense of discomfort about how their private data is being handled. Consumer sentiment on privacy is actually very much along the lines of what the woman in this picture is thinking. She's thinking, I'm tired of being targeted with irrelevant ads and feeling like my every move is being tracked around the web. I want to have seamless and meaningful experiences with the brands I know, like, and trust, and discover new brands that will make a positive impact on my life. So during the next 30 minutes or so, we'll dive into where we are in terms of consumer privacy today, what the death of third-party cookies means for marketers, and what we can do to future-proof our businesses and be wildly successful with marketing in this new era of privacy. So let's look at some of the changes in consumer privacy, consumer attitudes towards privacy, and where we stand in terms of being able to navigate this new environment. So this here that you see is a recent cartoon by Tom Fishburne, aka the Marketoonist, who's famous for creating these funny marketing-related cartoons. You've probably seen his work being shared all over LinkedIn. He's pretty famous and comes up with some really funny concepts. So in this cartoon, he's making fun of the privacy pop-ups that are now pretty much the first thing you see on every website that you go to. He's suggesting that by having website visitors click on the accept button, it gives businesses a free pass to store their data and track them across the web. And that it also kind of brings up the point that people don't even read the terms and conditions of these pop-ups before clicking accept. So it's really just kind of like a no-brainer that people just go ahead and click accept because they want to move on to the content of the website. Now, of course, this isn't really how we as marketers want to address privacy, and there's much more to obtaining and managing consent from your online users, but it certainly highlights how front and center privacy has become when it comes to business marketing. So let's move on to the next slide here. A recent study by Cisco of consumers and their opinions on digital privacy found that 86% of consumers care about data privacy. Consumers actually want transparency and control over how businesses handle their data. And this sentiment has not only been sparked by events such as the infamous Cambridge Analytica, but also the increased feelings of being stalked or being listened in on or being followed around the web by a creepy ad. Consumers are actually getting tired of seeing irrelevant ads, or even worse, ads that seem to know too much about their personal lives. And in response to this has been the adoption of ad blockers. So looking at this stat here, 27% of American internet users block ads. And it's not just consumers that have taken a stance. Governments have mandated regulations such as GDPR in Europe, which we all know about, and that happened a while ago, and then CCPA in California to protect consumer data privacy. And tech companies have jumped on the bandwagon too. Apple is one tech giant that comes to mind when we think of companies taking privacy seriously and into their own hands. Apple started blocking third-party cookies from their Safari browser in 2017, and so did Mozilla with their Firefox browser. But more famously and recently, and I'm sure you are all aware, Apple introduced its iOS 14 update that gave its mobile app users the choice of whether to allow an app to track them across other apps and websites. This is known as the ATT, the App Tracking Transparency feature. And so next we'll talk about its impact on Facebook and on advertising, specifically on Facebook, and what we at Location 3 do to mitigate the challenges that come with it. So this slide here is giving us, actually, yeah, sorry, we're on the right one. Sorry, apologies. Yeah. So this slide here talks about, basically shows us what happened when iOS released their dreaded update, right? This is the screen that pops up on all apps, including Facebook, after the update. And according to an article in socialmediatoday.com, more than 60% of Americans have opted out of tracking since this update was rolled out. So the most specific impact for Facebook here is with conversion reporting for ads. With Facebook now unable to track conversions in the same way as it used to. So it's important to remember that while the volume of conversions being reported after the update may have decreased, the actual conversions being driven are most likely not affected, and that's why it's important to understand your business data outside of Facebook. Apple's move to allow app users the choice to opt out of being tracked on apps and websites means that retargeting lists are also being affected because anyone on an iOS device who has opted out of tracking is no longer being added to website visitor lists. So to compensate for the shrinkage of retargeting audiences due to opted out users, we at Location 3 place a strong focus on a couple things to restore the size of our retargeting pools and give Facebook the larger audiences that its machine learning algorithm thrives on. So the first thing we do is we increase our retargeting look back windows. So we want to look back at a further window of time when we pool our retargeting audiences. This will give us some larger audiences to work with. We also leverage customer lists, email subscriber lists, and call center data. And this is first-party data that we really want to leverage and really want to get used to leveraging a lot more now, and we'll talk a little bit more about that later. The third thing that we do in Facebook to increase our retargeting audiences is use Facebook sources for retargeting. So these are people who have viewed our videos. So we retarget anyone who watched one of our Facebook videos by percentage viewed, anyone who's kind of interacted with one of our Facebook lead forms, anyone who's interacted with posts and ads on both Facebook and Instagram. And so by doing this, we bypass the need to use that pixel. And what we're really doing is capitalizing on Facebook's first-party data, right? People that have engaged with our ads and our videos and our forms, and take that list and use it to retarget. These audiences are all warm audiences that can and should be nurtured with lower funnel messaging and have proven to be really effective alternatives to the website visitor audiences which rely on the pixel. So now that we do have the iOS 14 update and it's in full force right now, we want to make sure that we do the best we can to have a good opportunity to retarget audiences that have shown interest in our brand and have interacted with us. It's also important to remember that the ATT changes only apply to mobile users. Desktop users are not affected until the Chrome cookie tracking is fully phased out, which will happen in 2023. At that point, we will see further loss of audience data on desktop. So one thing that we highly recommend to our clients and client partners here at Location 3 is to counter the general loss of conversion data reported by the Facebook pixel. We recommend that they deploy Facebook CAPI, which is Conversion API. So this is an integration that is a server-to-server approach. And what it does is it sends directly the data from your website to Facebook, right, without relying on the pixel. So in essence, we're bypassing that pixel and we're getting better attribution and better, more accurate data. We'll talk a little bit more about that later on in this presentation. And then, actually, I think we're one slide ahead, Ali. There you go. Yeah. So this is really what some may call the final nail in the coffin, right? The death of the third-party cookie, which is happening in 2023, as I mentioned. And while 2023 seems like a long way off, being ahead of the 8 ball is going to be key, right? Making sure that we're ahead of the game rather than waiting for that to happen and then trying to kind of deal with it when it happens. So we're going to talk about a few things that we can do as marketers that really do help us get prepared for D-Day, as I like to call it, which is the day that cookies will eventually disappear. So we'll talk about third-party cookies, and really, what is the deal with third-party cookies? So moving on to this slide here, it's kind of a funny slide, but really, there's kind of a bit of truth to this, quite a lot of truth to this, is that marketers, well, number one, we have become addicted to cookies as marketers, right? That's third-party cookies specifically. We've historically relied on third-party cookies for audience targeting, to track users across multiple websites, as well as to provide affinity, in-market, and lookalike audiences. But the time has come for us to wean ourselves off third-party cookies, not only because we won't have them soon, but because they've really not been that good for us. And what I mean by that is third-party cookies have always inherently been problematic. Why is that? Well, they can't really be kept in sync across ad tech platforms, and they can't really be maintained across different devices. So there's actually quite a huge level of inaccuracy when using cookies to personalize our ads. People are rarely using a single device these days in their daily lives. People are switching from desktop to mobile to TV to, laptop. And so cookies haven't really been effective for tracking those individuals across different devices, and the data has been quite messy. On top of that, as I mentioned before, consumers have the ability to clear their browser or even block cookies altogether, and they've not hesitated to do just that because of the creep factor involved. As this slide shows, the creep factor involved in being followed around the web with messaging, as we talked about, that's often irrelevant or actually outdated. So what comes to mind is being followed around the web with an ad for something that you already purchased. For example, that red handbag that I had my eye on a couple months ago, I actually purchased it, but the cookie was out of date, and so now I'm still being followed around the web with that same ad, and it's really annoying because I don't want to see it anymore. I already own it. So moving on to the next slide, where do we stand after third-party cookies go away? This is a question that comes up a lot. You know, our client partners ask this question. I get asked this question a lot. I mean, how will we be affected with the disappearance of third-party cookies? Well, the things on this slide that you see here will no longer be effective once it happens. So the first thing is behavioral targeting. This includes things like brand affinity and in-market status. We won't be able to have accurate full data on this. Retargeting, as we talked about, so following users around the web who have visited your site is going to become more problematic. Lookalike targeting will also become more problematic, and that's targeting audiences that exhibit similar traits to those who have visited your own website. Another big one is frequency capping. So right now, we're used to being able to limit the number of times an ad is shown to the same user in a given time period, right? Because we don't want to bombard them with the same message over and over. Well, with the disappearance of the third-party cookie, frequency capping is going to become a lot harder to do. And we're going to have to find new ways to deal with that. And then finally, view through attribution. So this is really applied mostly for display and video ads, where you want to understand who actually viewed your ad and then went ahead and purchased without actually clicking on it. View through attribution is also going to become really difficult, if not almost impossible, once third-party cookies disappear. So what's a marketer to do? Well, in the next few slides, we'll dive into ways that we can overcome the death of the third-party cookie by leveraging data, technology, new identity frameworks, and alternative ways of targeting. So moving on to the next slide, we'll look at marketing solutions in the new privacy era next. So here we see an infographic here, which talks about server-side conversion tracking. This is really a technology that is really going to be useful for us as marketers to get to grips with. I mentioned Facebook's CAPI, or Conversions API. That's exactly what server-side conversion tracking is. Google also has its own version of server-side tracking. And what it does is it lets us connect directly to the servers that host an advertiser's or retailer's site. So in the same way that a cookie or tracking pixel does, this process sends the information from an advertiser's site to those tech platform servers, telling them that someone clicked a product page or bought something, essentially showing that an exposure to an ad led someone to convert, but we're bypassing the need for third-party cookies, and we're bypassing the need for that pixel there. So server-side conversion tracking is removing dependencies such as user settings and browser extensions. So it's removing the client side from the picture and going directly to the server. So by doing this, you get a lot more control over what is sent to your platforms, your ad platforms, and how you're able to govern and protect that data. Server-side can help you get back those signals that may be blocked on the browser side. And there may also be site speed improvements on this as well, as there's less content to load and render. So with Facebook CAPI, we mitigate the impacts of ATT that we talked about. And Location 3 has the capability to deploy this for our clients using server-side tagging in GTM 360. So it's a pretty seamless way of applying server-side conversion tracking to your Facebook ad account. And Google Ads server-side tracking is also now available, and it's very similar to Facebook CAPI. Okay, so moving on to first-party data strategy. So this is another big topic buzzword, I would say. Marketers are talking about this everywhere, but it really isn't just a buzzword. If you're not doubling down on your first-party data, you could find yourself left high and dry. The fact is that your first-party data has always been powerful and valuable, and capturing and refining it is really like mining your own gold. Because at the end of the day, why would you want to spend precious marketing dollars driving people to your website, right? And other digital properties, and then not capturing meaningful and consented data about them. So you're really spending dollars driving people to your site, and if you're not capturing first-party data, you're losing them, right? And you're not able to then nurture them or refine the information that you have on them. So with the shifts in consumer online behavior, especially post-pandemic, and the increased awareness and demand for data privacy, consumers are not staying as loyal to brands as they used to be. So loyalty isn't a trait that we're seeing to be as common as it used to be amongst consumers. And businesses are having to shift their priority from just acquiring new customers to actually nurturing and retaining existing ones. So to do this, owning your first-party data is absolutely essential. Just to kind of reiterate, what is your first-party data? Well, it's information or data about your prospects and customers that you directly collected and you directly own. And it's based on interactions that they've had with your brand. And it could be not just on your website, but these are interactions that they could have had on your app, on your email, text communications, call center data, CRM, social media profiles, and even surveys and customer feedback. And the great thing about surveys and feedback from prospects and customers is that you can use it to enrich the profile that you've already built about each one of them. And this includes governance and respectfulness of their privacy preferences. Harnessing technology to then connect your ad platforms to your first-party data is another critical part of the first-party data strategy. So if we move on to the next slide, we see what is known as an identity framework, right? So we'll talk a little bit about these identity frameworks that you've probably heard about and why they will be helpful in overcoming the privacy problems that we potentially face as marketers. Identity frameworks are being developed by the big tech companies in an attempt to solve the problem of no more third-party cookies. These two that you see here on this slide are the most promising and well-known identity frameworks out there. Both of these have now been through a summer of testing that revealed promise as well as limitations. So Google's core innovation, known as FLoC, relies on the concept of cohorts, hence the name Federated Learning of Cohorts, which is what FLoC stands for. Google's solution will apply to the Chrome browser, and what they will do is aggregate audiences into anonymous cohorts that will then be retargetable. So in essence, they're kind of bringing back the ability to target to people or retarget people. But these cohorts are anonymous. That's the key word there, in the sense that while messaging can still be targeted specifically to their known preferences, there's kind of like a safety in numbers effect. So their PII, personal identifiable information, is kept completely anonymous, and it's not really being done on an individual to individual basis. We're not targeting a specific person, but we're rather grouping that person into a cohort of like-minded or similar people. So really this individual is anonymized within the wider cohort. Then the other identity framework, which you probably also heard a lot of chatter about recently, is UID 2.0. And this was developed under partnerships between big companies such as the Trade Desk, LiveRamp, Oracle, Nielsen, Neustar, these huge companies and many others. They've gotten together and really basically pledged that they want to get this identity framework to become, a reality and to become the accepted standard. So UID 2.0 will essentially work by having users log in to publisher websites or apps and hashing or anonymizing the information which essentially creates kind of an identifier similar to a consent-based cookie. So, I mean, immediately off the bat, you could probably tell that there's some issues or challenges with this solution, in the sense that it will rely on the cooperation of a large pool of publishers, because they have to be in on it. And it also is going to require widespread adoption by consumers to gain scale and momentum, because if consumers refuse to enter their email address when they first enter a website, then they're not going to be able to capture that and hash it and really identify that person. So it's really kind of requiring some collaboration and cooperation on both sides, publisher and consumer. One notable fact about Unified ID 2.0 is that Google has announced that it will not support this type of alternative identifier in its suite of products. So already some friction going on there between Google and this group of companies here. So, in short, there's a long way to go for these identity frameworks to become viable solutions, and there's still lots of testing and experimentation still to come. And I think it's our job as an agency to really stay on top of this and really understand what they mean for us as marketers to do effective marketing for our client partners. Moving on to machine learning and blended data. So this is another phenomenon which is becoming really widespread and really being adopted by several ad tech platforms. And so machine learning, again, another buzzword, but it's playing an increasingly important role in not only automating our marketing and making it smarter, but also filling gaps in data caused by privacy measures such as the loss of third-party cookies and ATT. So Google Analytics 4 is a new version of GA that addresses web analytics from a privacy and consumer-focused perspective by using machine learning and predictive metrics. So, it's available to use, and it's GA4 is it's an event-based rather than a session-based platform. And what this means is that it has been designed to focus on consumer events and harnesses machine learning and other protocols to fill in data gaps. Google calls this blended data. So allocation 3, we ensure that a GA4 property is created for all of our client partner accounts to start collecting data, but we keep the existing universal analytics property running alongside it. This is the best practice right now and recommended by Google. And ultimately, GA4 will be the new Google standard, and we want our client partners to be ready for it. So right now we have both properties running side by side, collecting data from both, and eventually we will undoubtedly flip over to GA4. Along these same lines of using advanced machine learning for analytics, Google recently announced it will now default all Google campaign conversion actions to data-driven attribution instead of last click. We probably heard about this in the news. Again, this is a move towards using technology and data to be privacy focused and really not relying on third-party cookies, leveraging that blended data that we talked about. Facebook's also working to implement a new system that estimates activity based on system learning along similar lines to this. So lots of things in the works by the big ad tech platforms to bypass this loss of cookie data and really fill in the gaps where we potentially wouldn't know what happened. We wouldn't have the ability to understand what our consumers had done, how they behaved. And so using machine learning and predictive metrics, we're able to kind of plug those gaps and really understand that information. And then finally, the kind of last piece of the puzzle as far as what I'm really excited about in terms of overcoming some of the challenges with privacy and how to leverage first-party data in a much more automated way is customer data platform. So this infographic here It really just shows what customer data platform is. It's a technology. A lot of people say it's the new CRM because it's kind of CRM on steroids. And really what it is it allows us to have a single unified view of our customer. The infographic just shows how it works in terms of ingesting data and activating data, but it's really CDP is one of those three-letter marketing acronyms that we're hearing a lot about these days. It's a powerful technology, and really selecting the right CDP platform for your business is imperative if you want to level up your customer data game. I don't know if anyone listened to this year's MarTech conference or, actually virtually attended it. It was free again this year. Had lots of great webinar sessions as usual. What I noticed this year was that a large percent of the webinar sessions were covering the topic of CDP, which is a clear indicator that this is and will continue to be a top-of-mind technology solution for marketers going into 2022. It's something that we're starting to have conversations with our client partners, and I'm really excited for what CDP will bring to the table because I really believe it's going to be a game changer for marketing performance. Looking back at the infographic, what it's really showing is that CDPs ingest data from several disparate data sources across a business. So your company website, your email, Facebook, CRM, point of sale system, offline sales, even things that are happening offline, and data lakes. So all the places that your business currently stores data, which is very disparate, CDP will take that data and put it into a unified and persistent state of storage. So this first-party data that we now have, which incidentally can be anonymous and known users, so it doesn't necessarily have to be an email address or a phone number. It can be based on behaviors that someone has made or done on various properties. And what this does is solve the problem of identity resolution, both from deterministic and probabilistic angles. The promise of CDPs is to make the holy grail of marketing a reality, and that's that single view of the customer, or the golden record of the customer. CDPs are helping to solve the problems brought about by privacy regulations and the deprecation of third-party cookies by making first-party data the star of the show and allowing businesses to build upon and refine their first-party data to create ever richer profiles of their customers. So this focus on customer centricity will allow you to continue targeting customers with impactful advertising campaigns, all while meeting the highest standards of privacy, security, and compliance. So really excited about this technology. And then finally, just to recap, just kind of go over some of the ideas that I talked about today in navigating marketing in a privacy-focused world. First-party data strategy, and really having a playbook for executing on the collection, storage, refinement, and activation of first-party data is a strategic imperative. It cannot be said enough that while we're probably all sick about hearing it, it really is a strategic imperative. And then secondly, technology such as CDP, which can really help with the activation part of your first-party strategy. Tech and automation solutions for privacy also include what we talked about, server-side conversion tracking and integrations between things like your CRM and your advertising platforms. And then we talked about leveraging new tools like Google Analytics 4, which use machine learning and predictive metrics to fill in the data gaps in a privacy-compliant manner. And then finally, being up to date on the latest developments in the new identity frameworks, such as FLoC and UID 2.0, really understanding how they work and how they can help with targeting and marketing effectiveness. And with that will conclude my presentation, and I would be happy to take any questions that anyone may have.
Awesome job, Vera. Thank you so much for your time today. Great presentation. I don't see any questions in here just yet. You were in super detail about everything, so that definitely could be why. But I don't see any questions in here. If anybody has any follow-up questions for Vera, please feel free to reach out. I'd be happy to get you guys connected with one another. But this recording also will be posted on the Location 3 listing page, so please make sure to jump in there and check it out. But if you have any closing statements before we log off, Vera, it is all you.
Yeah, absolutely. No, it's just been a pleasure to present this. And, like you said, if anyone has any questions for me, feel free to reach out to me. My email is vshafiq@location3.com. And I would be happy to have a conversation on any of these topics with anyone who's interested.
Awesome. Thank you again, Vera, for your time today. Thank you to everybody who jumped on the call as well. If anybody has any follow-up questions, just like we said, I'd be happy to connect you with Vera as well. But thank you again, everybody, and I hope you guys all enjoy the rest of your day.